in ways that would seem casual, almost accidental. I read the message slowly, savoring the clarity it brought. They had revealed themselves, planning around a secret I had kept carefully locked away. And I knew it was time. I called Elaine the next day, keeping my voice calm, neutral, almost gentle. "Elaine, I think we need to have a conversation." Her tone shifted immediately, a mix of suspicion and nervousness. "Oh? About what?" "About honesty. About intentions. About care." The silence on the other end was brief, then she stammered, I don't understand." "I think you do," I said softly. "I've been observing, just as you've been testing me. And now, I think it's important that we speak openly." We arranged to meet in a neutral location, a quiet cafe, one where we could talk without interruption. The tension was palpable, though I remained composed, calm, my every word deliberate. "Miranda," she began, trying to mask the fear in her voice, "I only wanted what was best for the family." "But not for me," I interrupted gently. "Not for me. You wanted what was best for the inheritance, for the money, not for my heart, my life, or my well-being." Her eyes filled with tears, a mix of shame and desperation. Mom, I didn't mean." "Intentions matter," I said, finishing her thought for her. "Love is shown through care, through actions, not through expectation. And now, the truth is clear. You have shown who you are." She left the cafe quietly, a mix of humiliation and understanding on her face. It wasn't cruel, it wasn't vindictive. It was justice in its most honest, human form. She had been revealed, and I had remained dignified, calm, and observant. That evening, I reflected on the past weeks. The inheritance, the secret, the tests, the subtle betrayals, they had all led to clarity. And the greatest relief of all was knowing that some bonds, like the one I shared with Jeremy, were unshakable. Some love was genuine, unwavering, and pure. The money, in the end, had done its work. It had revealed hearts, motives, and the true measure of those closest to me. And as I sipped my tea, feeling the warmth seep through my fingers, I realized that freedom, clarity, and understanding were far more valuable than any inheritance could ever be. The days that followed Elaine's revelation were quieter, but the atmosphere in the house felt different. There was a tension that had lifted, strangely, replaced by a sense of clarity. People had begun to behave with more honesty, some out of fear, some out of genuine realization, but all under the quiet shadow of the inheritance I had kept secret. I took the time to reconnect with those who truly mattered. Jeremy remained my anchor, his presence a steady reassurance amid the swirling uncertainties of my family. We spent long afternoons in the garden, planting, trimming, and simply talking. His laughter was uncomplicated, a balm for the subtle wounds left by observation and betrayal. Yet, even in the calm, I remained vigilant. I had learned that human nature is complex, that greed and love often intertwine, and that patience was my greatest ally. Each encounter, each conversation, each interaction became an opportunity to observe, to understand, and to guide without overt interference. It was during one of these quiet afternoons that my cousin Felicity approached me with a tentative suggestion. She had been quieter since Elaine's misstep, and I could sense hesitation in her tone. "Miranda," she began, careful with each word, I've been thinking. Maybe I've been too ambitious, too focused on the inheritance rather than on family. I want to make things right." I studied her, noting the subtle shifts in posture, the flicker of sincerity in her eyes. This was a test, as much as hers had been, a moment to gauge whether growth was possible, whether acknowledgement of past missteps could lead to genuine change. "Felicity," I said gently, "it's never too late to choose honesty. To choose care over expectation. That's what truly matters." Her shoulders relaxed, the tension in her face easing, and for the first time I saw a genuine willingness to change. She stayed longer that day, helping me in the kitchen, listening quietly as I shared memories of our father, of the lessons he had instilled in us, not about wealth, but about integrity, compassion, and understanding. That evening, after she left, I sat by the window with my journal open. I wrote about the past weeks, the subtle manipulations, the small betrayals, the moments of clarity, and realized that the inheritance, while significant in monetary terms, had been a catalyst for something far more valuable: truth. It was during this reflection that I received a message from Elaine. She had been silent for days, and I was curious to see her response. "Miranda," the message read, "I've had time to think. I understand now. I see my mistakes. I hope someday you can forgive me." I stared at the screen for a long moment, the words both unsettling and relieving. Forgiveness was a choice, not a requirement. And I had learned that dignity lies not in revenge, but in measured response. I typed back slowly, deliberately, "Elaine, understanding is the first step. Actions now must follow words. Let's see how you choose to move forward." The weight of the inheritance had lifted in a sense. Its purpose had been served: to reveal hearts, to expose motives, and to illuminate who genuinely cared. Over the next few weeks, I continued subtle observation, but with a lighter heart. People's true colors had been revealed, and those who mattered most, Jeremy, Felicity in her newfound sincerity, remained. Others, like Elaine, had been given the opportunity to reflect, to learn, to adjust. Then came the moment that truly confirmed the journey's value. A distant relative, who had long been indifferent, reached out to me, not about money, not about expectation, but simply to reconnect, to share memories, to ask about my well-being. The difference was profound. Care without expectation, love without strings, this was the ultimate lesson. That night, as I prepared for bed, I reflected on the quiet power of patience and observation. The inheritance, while hidden, had allowed me to see clearly, to understand the depths of my family's hearts, and to make choices that preserved dignity, love, and integrity. I thought about my father again, about his words, "Wealth reveals what's already there." He had been right. And now, I was ready to live my life with that understanding, with the quiet satisfaction of truth and clarity guiding each step. Jeremy came in to say goodnight, his presence a warm reminder of unconditional love. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, concern in his voice. I smiled, ruffling his hair gently. "I'm more than okay. I've learned something important. And I think I'm finally free." He hugged me, and I felt the tension of the past week's release in that simple embrace. The inheritance, while still a secret to most, had done its work. It had been a mirror, a lens, a teacher. And now, I could focus on what truly mattered: genuine relationships, honest intentions, and the quiet strength of knowing who cared for me, not for what I had, but for who I was. As I lay in bed that night, the house silent except for the distant hum of traffic, I felt a profound sense of peace. The inheritance was no longer a test or a trap, it was a revelation. And with that revelation came clarity, empowerment, and a deep understanding of human nature. I closed my eyes, the lessons of the past week settling like gentle whispers in my mind. Some people had shown their true selves, some had faltered, and some, like Jeremy, had remained unwavering. And I realized that this understanding, this quiet knowledge of truth, was more valuable than any sum of money could ever be. The following week brought a subtle shift in family dynamics. Elaine's distance was noticeable, though she still made occasional attempts at contact. But the calculated edge was gone. There was no probing, no expectation, only a tentative effort to reconnect, a small gesture, and perhaps the first genuine step toward understanding her own behavior. I watched from a careful distance, observing not to judge, but to see if sincerity could emerge. Sometimes, the people who stumble the hardest are the ones most capable of change, and I had learned to recognize that potential. Meanwhile, Jeremy and I began discussing long-term plans, not about investments or inheritances, but about life, memories, and shared experiences. We decided to take a short weekend trip to the countryside, a quiet escape to celebrate clarity, trust, and the rare stability that had survived weeks of subtle family tension. On the morning of our departure, I received a call from Felicity. "Miranda, I wanted to apologize again. I realize I got caught up in everything. I want to help, but I also want to do it the right way." Her voice was sincere, unhurried, careful. I could tell she had reflected, not just responded. Felicity, I appreciate that. Actions speak louder than words. Let's see how things go from here. Her relief was evident, though muted. We hung up, and I felt a small weight lift. Not because of forgiveness, but because people could change if given the chance and guided gently. The countryside trip was everything I had hoped for. Rolling hills, the scent of fresh grass, the quiet hum of distant birds, it was a stark contrast to the subtle tension that had filled my home for weeks. Jeremy and I walked along a narrow path, sunlight spilling across the fields, his hand brushing mine in a casual, comforting gesture. I think this was the best idea, he said softly. Just us. I smiled, feeling the simplicity of the moment wash over me. Sometimes, Jeremy, that's all we need. Just connection. Just honesty. Just love. We talked about the past weeks, laughing quietly at small anecdotes, the tension of observation now a distant memory. It was in these moments I realized the true purpose of what I had done. The inheritance, the secrecy, the careful observations, it wasn't about revenge, manipulation, or even testing loyalty. It was about understanding human nature, protecting myself, and learning who truly mattered. Upon returning home, I found Elaine at the door, hesitant but composed. She handed me a small note, folded neatly. I unfolded it and read. Miranda, I have been selfish. I allowed my expectations to cloud my care. I hope one day I can show you that I can be better. Thank you for giving me a chance to reflect. I studied her words carefully. It was short, restrained, but genuine. No grand promises, no excuses, just acknowledgement. I smiled softly. Change didn't happen overnight, and some trust needed to be rebuilt slowly. But this was a start. The next few days were quiet, almost serene. I allowed myself to focus on personal projects, hobbies, and time with Jeremy. We planted new flowers in the garden, tried out new recipes, and even started a small home library of books I had always wanted to read but never had the time for. The house felt alive, not with expectation or ambition, but with gentle presence, care, and intention. One afternoon, while reorganizing some old photographs, I stumbled upon pictures of my father, his smile wide, eyes crinkling at the corners. I remembered his words about wealth, about observing human nature, about the quiet clarity that comes when one truly sees people for who they are. I realized now that I had inherited more than money. I had inherited insight, discernment, and the ability to navigate life with measured care. The inheritance had been a tool, yes, but also a lesson. It had revealed hearts, exposed motives, and tested patience. And through it all, I had maintained my dignity, my perspective, and my sense of morality. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I invited Jeremy to sit with me on the veranda. The sky was painted in soft shades of orange and pink, the gentle breeze carrying the scent of jasmine. You know, I said quietly, sometimes I think people fear wealth because it shows them who they are. But I've learned that clarity is priceless. Seeing people for who they truly are, that's worth more than any amount of money. Jeremy nodded, resting his head lightly on my shoulder. I'm glad you kept your secret. It helped you see, and helped all of us see as well. I smiled, the warmth of the moment settling deep into my chest. Yes. And now, it's time to move forward. Not with suspicion, not with fear, but with understanding. And care, when it's genuine. As night fell, I reflected on the journey so far. The inheritance had revealed ambition, expectation, and subtle greed, but it had also revealed love, loyalty, and the capacity for reflection. Some family members had faltered, some had grown, and some had remained steadfast. And through it all, I had learned the most valuable lesson of all, that true care cannot be bought, that trust must be earned, and that clarity comes to those willing to observe patiently. I closed the day with a quiet gratitude, for Jeremy, for the lessons learned, and for the subtle strength I had discovered within myself. The inheritance was no longer a secret. In my heart, I had unlocked its true value, insight, clarity, and the wisdom to know who truly mattered. The following week felt like a turning point. The tension that had dominated the house for so long was finally dissipating. Elaine kept her distance, though occasionally she would reach out with short, careful messages, polite but restrained. Felicity was more present now, offering help without expectation, her sincerity growing with each interaction. It was clear that the inheritance had done its work, not by creating chaos, but by revealing truths that had been hidden beneath polite smiles and carefully chosen words. I spent those days in quiet reflection, walking through the garden, feeling the soil between my fingers, the scent of lavender and rosemary grounding me. Every small gesture, watering plants, pruning roses, arranging flowers, reminded me of the simple truths that mattered. Money had been the catalyst, yes, but it was never the real lesson. The lesson was human nature, relationships, and the clarity that comes when motives are revealed. One evening, as I was preparing tea, my phone rang. It was Jeremy. "Mom, I was thinking, maybe we should host a small dinner. Just close family, a way to reconnect." I paused, considering. It could be complicated, given the past few weeks, but it was also an opportunity to set a new tone, one of honesty, care, and mutual respect. "That sounds wonderful, Jeremy. Let's do it." We spent the next few days preparing. I cleaned the house, arranged flowers on the dining table, and chose dishes that felt warm and inviting. The aroma of roast chicken, fresh herbs, and baked bread filled the house, a comforting backdrop to the nervous anticipation. When the evening arrived, I noticed subtle shifts in the family's demeanor. Elaine entered first, careful, composed, polite. There was no manipulation in her expression, just a tentative attempt to bridge the gap. Felicity arrived shortly after, her presence calm and unassuming, offering quiet gestures of care. Dinner began slowly, conversations light at first. I observed quietly, noting the difference in tone, the sincerity in gestures, the small moments that revealed intent without needing to be stated aloud. Elaine asked about the garden, genuinely curious, while Felicity helped with serving dishes, attentive but not overbearing. Jeremy, as always, was the anchor. His laughter, his warmth, his simple joy in being present reminded everyone of the genuine bonds that had survived the subtle tests of the past weeks. Midway through the evening, I decided to address the elephant in the room. "I wanted to take a moment to say something," I began, my voice calm, measured. "The past few weeks have been revealing. The inheritance I received has shown me a lot, not just about money, but about people, about motives, about care. And I've realized something important: honesty, care, and integrity matter more than anything else." Elaine's eyes widened slightly, but she did not interrupt. Felicity nodded, her expression open, receptive. "I know this may have been difficult," I continued, "and perhaps some of us made mistakes. But what matters now is how we move forward, with respect, with understanding, and with genuine care for each other." The room was silent for a moment, then small nods, tentative smiles. The tension had lifted, replaced by a sense of possibility, of reconciliation. Later that evening, Jeremy and I sat by the fire, the warmth of the flames a comforting contrast to the crisp night air outside. "Mom," he said softly, "you've handled everything with such grace. The inheritance, the observations, it could have been so toxic, but you turned it into clarity." I smiled, feeling the weight of the past week settle into a calm resolution. Yes. It was a test, but also a lesson, for me and for them. And now, we can focus on what really matters. The following morning, I received a message from Elaine. Short, restrained, but sincere: "Thank you for giving me a chance to reflect. I hope to show you I've learned." I allowed myself a small smile. Forgiveness, like trust, was a gradual process. But the acknowledgement was a start. Over the next several days, life continued with a quiet rhythm. The inheritance remained intact, untouched, a secret no longer necessary to reveal. Its purpose had been fulfilled. My family, now aware of the clarity it brought, adjusted their behaviors accordingly. And I found a new sense of freedom. Free from expectation, free from subtle manipulation, free to focus on what truly mattered, relationships built on trust, care, and honesty. One afternoon, while journaling in the garden, I reflected on everything that had transpired. The inheritance had been more than money, it had been a mirror, revealing the hearts of those around me. It had tested patience, discernment, and emotional intelligence. And in the end, it had reaffirmed the importance of love, genuine connection, and moral clarity. As I closed my journal and looked across the garden, I realized that the real wealth was not in the millions of dollars waiting quietly in the account, but in the lessons learned, the truths revealed, and the peace that had finally settled in my heart. And in that moment, I understood fully, clarity and understanding are treasures far greater than any inheritance could ever provide. The days that followed were marked by subtle, positive changes. The house, once filled with tension and unspoken ambition, now carried a quiet warmth. Conversations flowed naturally, laughter returned in small doses, and even the air seemed lighter. I could finally focus on the life I wanted to build, not driven by observation or secret tests, but by genuine connection and shared experiences. Elaine's attempts to reconnect became more consistent, her gestures smaller but sincere. She helped with errands, offered to cook a meal, and even asked advice without expectation of financial gain. It was a cautious, but genuine, attempt to rebuild bridges. I noticed that Felicity remained calm, supportive, and grounded, no longer attempting to maneuver for advantage. And Jeremy, as always, was steady, his presence a quiet reassurance that true love and care could withstand even the most subtle turbulence. One afternoon, while I was reorganizing the living room, I found an old family photo album tucked behind the shelves. Dusty, forgotten, yet full of memories. I opened it slowly, running my fingers over the edges of each photograph, each page telling a story of laughter, celebration, and togetherness. It struck me how long it had been since we had appreciated these simple moments. How easy it was to forget that life's true value wasn't in money or inheritance, but in connection and shared memories. I brought the album to Jeremy, who sat cross-legged on the floor, sipping tea. "Look at this," I said, pointing to a photo of our family picnic from years ago. Everyone was laughing, unguarded, truly happy. We were so carefree back then. I think we need to find a way back to that. Jeremy smiled, his eyes bright. We can. And maybe it's time we start creating new memories too, without the shadows of expectation hanging over us. That evening, I decided it was time to address my family more broadly. Not with confrontation, but with guidance, reflection, and the intention to heal. I called a small gathering, inviting those who had been part of the inheritance saga, Elaine, Felicity, and a few others who had subtly revealed their true intentions over the past weeks. When they arrived, I felt a mixture of anticipation and calm. I had prepared myself not for confrontation, but for honest conversation, hoping that the lessons of the past weeks would take root in their hearts. I invited you all here, I began, voice steady, calm, not to discuss money, not to test anyone, but to reflect on what has happened. The past weeks have been revealing. Some of you have acted with sincerity, some with expectation, and some have had the chance to reconsider your actions. Elaine looked at me, her expression nervous but attentive. Felicity nodded, quiet but present. Money has a way of showing who people truly are, I continued. But it is not the wealth itself that matters, it is the care, the honesty, and the intention behind our actions. What I hope for now is that we can move forward with clarity, integrity, and genuine love for one another. There was a moment of silence, then small nods, tentative acknowledgement. I could see that my words had penetrated, not with force, but with truth. Elaine spoke first, softly, carefully. Miranda. I realize now that I let ambition cloud my care. I want to make amends, to show that I've learned. Thank you for giving me the chance to reflect. Her words were sincere, restrained, honest. And for the first time I felt no lingering tension, no trace of manipulation, just the possibility of genuine reconciliation. Felicity spoke next, her voice calm and steady. I understand now, too. I let expectations guide me rather than heart. I will strive to do better. I nodded, feeling a wave of relief and subtle joy. The inheritance had done its work, not by creating conflict, but by revealing truths and providing opportunities for reflection and growth. Over the next few days, life continued with a steady rhythm. Meals were shared, small conversations blossomed into meaningful dialogue, and the subtle warmth of genuine connection began to grow stronger. Elaine helped in small ways around the house, Felicity remained attentive but grounded, and Jeremy continued to be my anchor, reminding me daily that unconditional love exists, even amid past missteps. One morning, while sitting in the garden with a cup of tea, I reflected on the journey. The inheritance, the secrecy, the careful observation, it had all led to this moment of clarity. I had learned who truly cared, who acted out of genuine affection, and who had been motivated by expectation. And most importantly, I had discovered the profound value of patience, discernment, and moral clarity. I thought about the lessons I wanted to carry forward. Observe, but do not judge harshly. People reveal themselves in their own time. True care is unconditional, and cannot be bought or coerced. Forgiveness is a process, but acknowledgement of wrongdoing is the first step. Wealth can illuminate motives, but it does not define relationships, actions and intentions do. With these reflections, I felt a sense of empowerment I had not anticipated. The inheritance had been more than money, it had been a mirror, a teacher, and a guide. And now, I could move forward with clarity, compassion, and the confidence that my relationships were based on genuine care, not expectation. That evening, as the house settled into quiet, I sat by the window, the moon casting soft light across the room. I felt a sense of peace that had been elusive for weeks. The inheritance, the tests, the revelations, all had led to this moment of understanding. And I knew that life, while complex and sometimes unpredictable, could be navigated with patience, discernment, and the courage to observe and act with integrity. Jeremy came into the room, settling beside me with a small smile. "Mom, you've changed everything, not by confrontation or anger, but by patience and clarity. I've learned so much from watching you." I smiled, resting my hand on his. "And I've learned that love and care are the greatest treasures of all. Wealth may reveal motives, but understanding reveals hearts." As night fell, I allowed myself a quiet gratitude, for the lessons learned, for the clarity gained, and for the genuine connections that had endured. The inheritance had done its work, and now, I was free to live with peace, understanding, and the confidence that I could navigate the complexities of family, love, and life with dignity and grace. The weeks that followed felt like a soft, steady unfolding of life, like sunlight spilling slowly across a quiet room. The inheritance, once a secret and a tool, had quietly transformed into a mirror, reflecting truth, intentions, and the real measure of those closest to me. And with that reflection came peace. Elaine's efforts to rebuild trust became consistent and grounded. She no longer tried to charm or manipulate. Instead, she brought small gestures of care, a cup of tea in the morning, helping with errands, or simply checking in without expectation. There was humility in her actions now, a recognition of past mistakes, and a tentative willingness to grow. I didn't rush her. Healing, like trust, needed time. Felicity, too, settled into a role of quiet support. Gone were the subtle calculations, replaced by genuine attention and the occasional thoughtful question about my well-being. We spent afternoons sorting through old family albums, talking about memories long buried, and laughing over forgotten anecdotes. These moments reminded me that the true inheritance my father left me wasn't money, it was clarity, insight, and the wisdom to see hearts for what they truly are. Jeremy became my constant, unwavering companion. In his presence, I found joy untainted by expectation, love unshaken by greed, and laughter unburdened by hidden motives. One evening, while watching the sunset paint the garden in shades of gold and crimson, I realized how much I had missed these simple, unguarded moments in life. The inheritance had tested patience and observation, but it had also allowed me to see who truly belonged in my life, and who did not. The culmination of this journey came one Sunday afternoon. I had invited both Elaine and Felicity to tea, not as a formal meeting, but as a gentle way to mark the beginning of a new chapter. The table was set simply, with fresh flowers and warm scones, and the atmosphere was light, calm, and inviting. "Thank you for coming," I said, keeping my tone gentle, reflective. "I wanted to share something with both of you, not money, not possessions, but a moment of clarity." Elaine looked at me, her eyes cautious but open. I appreciate this, Miranda." Felicity nodded quietly, her expression calm. "Me too." I smiled softly. The past weeks have been revealing. They've shown me that love and care cannot be bought, that true intentions are revealed through actions, and that patience and observation are powerful tools for understanding. I hope that, moving forward, we can all focus on what truly matters: honesty, integrity, and genuine care for one another. Elaine's voice trembled slightly as she replied, "I understand. I've made mistakes, but I want to do better. I want to show you that I've learned from them." "I see that," I said, my voice gentle. "Actions will speak louder than words. And I trust that we all can grow from this." Felicity reached across the table, resting her hand lightly on mine. "We will." I promised to act with care and sincerity. It was a quiet moment, unadorned by grand gestures, yet profoundly meaningful. The inheritance, the secrecy, the subtle tests, all of it had led to this: a chance for understanding, reconciliation, and the rebuilding of trust. Over the next days, life continued with a quiet rhythm of growth. Elaine assisted with small household tasks, not for recognition, but out of genuine desire to contribute. Felicity continued her thoughtful attentiveness, never overstepping, always present in meaningful ways. And Jeremy remained my anchor, a constant reminder that unconditional love exists, steadfast and true. One evening, I found myself alone in the garden, watching the last rays of the sun fade behind the trees. The scent of lavender and rosemary filled the air, the gentle hum of evening insects surrounding me. I realized, with a quiet sense of gratitude, that the inheritance had not only revealed hearts, it had refined them, offering a chance to discern, forgive, and heal. I thought back to the first day I had received the news, the surge of emotion, the temptation to test and observe. I smiled softly, understanding now that the lesson was never about wealth itself. It was about human nature, about motives, about clarity and moral strength. The millions in the account were meaningless compared to the understanding, insight, and peace I now carried in my heart. The inheritance had been a catalyst, but the real treasure was the quiet wisdom it had brought. True care cannot be coerced or bought, it must be genuine. Patience and observation reveal the true measure of people. Forgiveness is powerful, but only when coupled with accountability. Clarity and understanding are richer than any material wealth. As night fell, I sat by the window with Jeremy beside me, the house finally calm. "Mom," he said softly, "what happens now?" I took a deep breath, feeling the quiet weight of satisfaction. "Now, we live, we love, and we act with integrity. We remember the lessons, and we move forward with clarity and compassion. That is the true inheritance." He nodded, his hand finding mine, and I felt a sense of completion, a gentle closure that had been absent for so long. The past weeks of subtle observation, testing, and revelation had led not to bitterness, but to understanding, forgiveness, and healing. Before bed, I wrote in my journal, reflecting on the journey. The inheritance revealed what money cannot: hearts. It tested patience, revealed motives, and offered clarity. Some stumbled, some grew, and some remained steadfast. And in the end, I realized that wealth pales in comparison to understanding, love, and moral clarity. True care is priceless, and clarity is the greatest gift of all. I closed the journal, the quiet stillness of the night settling over the house. For the first time in weeks, I felt a profound sense of peace. The inheritance had served its purpose. Relationships had been tested and strengthened, truths revealed, and hearts refined. And now, the future stretched before me, filled not with expectation or manipulation, but with clarity, love, and the quiet joy of knowing who truly cared. I thought about the audience, imagining the countless people who might one day hear my story, Would they choose patience over suspicion? Observation over reaction? Would they value clarity and moral strength above all else? And I realized, with gentle certainty, that this was the ultimate lesson: life is not about what we possess, it is about what we see, what we understand, and how we act when the truth is revealed. The inheritance was no longer a secret, a test, or a source of tension. It had become a teacher, a mirror, and a quiet path to wisdom. And I, finally, was free.